Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sodomite's Guide to Reality. In this episode, we discuss free will and its implications on moral judgment. If you want to follow me on Twitter, feel free to do so at Latent Physicist. My fellow podcaster still currently prefers to remain anonymous, and until further notice, he will remain as such. If you're listening to this on iTunes or any other podcasting service, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Endless Aporia. Now, without further ado, here is a conversation on free will. Alright, well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second episode of Sodomite's Guide to Reality. What do you think about the title, actually? I never even consulted with you on that. I just changed it.
Sodomite's Guide to what?
Reality.
To reality. I'm guiding people in reality?
Oh, yeah, that was what I was concerned about. So it's not a matter of we're showing you the way to reality, but rather we're attempting to show ourselves a way to reality. So we're just trying to understand reality as it is.
Okay, well...
Another misconception that might come from that name is that we're both sodomites. I just thought it was a cool thing to call it.
Is sodomites anal sex?
Yeah, it's usually referred to.
That's going to have some implications.
Is the implication?
Whatever.
Oh.
Fine. I have never practiced sodomy yet, but you will see, I guess.
You plan on it?
I don't know. Well, the future is vast and wild.
All right. What would you do if I just locked the door and dimmed the lights right now?
I would check to see if the windows are open.
Okay.
We're on the second floor.
Third floor, actually.
Oh, well, at least there's a sand pit.
You're going to have to speak louder because I can't hear you for shit here.
Okay. So, should I begin my rideshare conversation?
Yeah, you were giving me a pretty interesting rideshare conversation, and I told you to wait for the podcast.
So, rideshare is when you join a car with random strangers and they drive you somewhere. And usually it's pretty quiet. Somebody plays some music. You try to fall asleep. It's like a 5.5 hour drive from point A to point B. And and usually it's a very light conversation. Ooh, what are you studying? Blah, blah, blah. This time I was sitting with some people, especially one girl who was very, very talkative, and she was also very into astrology, which I found interesting. Anyway, so we were driving and she was asking questions, and it was pretty clear that she's studying the humanities. And she has a very left-leaning... the SJW, regressive left? Yeah,
tendency.
Except she was very, very nice and conversational and not particularly... She was a little judgmental. She gave you the side eye, but it was friendly. And she started talking about stuff, and I think we got into some very, very fun conversations. We talked about, in the end, we had an abortion conversation, and at one point she talked about the use of certain words, and there was a nice black gentleman to my right. I was sitting in the center, and she was talking about how we should avoid using the words the N word and the R word, and then I politely said, by R word, do you mean retarded? And then she gave me a nice little look, and then we had a conversation about prescriptive and descriptive linguistics. And I was saying, well, words only mean what people agree they mean, and if you use a word in a context in which it is not derogatory or bigoted, then I have no problem with it. She disagreed with that position. I don't quite recall the entire conversation, but it was interesting. And let's see what else. The whole topic started after astrology, where I was being very skeptical to astrology. She was giving every single person in the car.
Oh, I fucking hate those. I can't stand that.
She was doing a reading on every single person in the car, and I was explaining how it works. Like how you can say certain phrases such as like you say one thing and then the exact opposite. Like you are very outgoing and friendly, but you also like to have some moments to yourself, have some quiet introspection. And if you say stuff like that, then most people will associate themselves very strongly with it. So a lot of these astrological claims are in that structure. Some of them are more specific. And so I was being not hyper skeptical, but I was like totally confrontationally saying like, this is all bullshit.
Yeah.
And she did, and then I challenged her to guess what my birth date is based off of our conversation and like how I spoke and stuff like that. And I don't think she guessed, but eventually she did a reading on me, and it wasn't too bad. But the whole point, like, even if you get it right for the most part, it's still like a sample size of one. And she made, of course, a few like terrible mistakes. She was like asking like, do you have trouble with your mother? And I was like, no.
Trouble with your mother?
Yeah, like apparently I had a lot of I don't know, they have like water and fire stuff. I don't know how it works, but apparently I should be having some mother issues, and I was like, I don't have any mother issues.
I mean, even if other people would say that you didn't, you could probably, because of the negativity bias that we have, where we would prioritize the bad conversations that we had with our parents, we immediately think that, well, therefore we must have bad relationships with our parents, even though most people outside of your box or your bubble, they wouldn't they wouldn't perceive you as having issues with your parents.
And I think there's a whole, like, I think she was really good. Like, she did some really excellent cold reading, I think.
Yeah.
She was, I think a large part of it is you have a certain attributes associated with certain random, like, astrological signs, and you sort of say the ones that you think are more relevant. Like, you're probably not going to mention it if it says something that you think is not even if it's supposedly connected, you just don't mention something that doesn't agree. Anyway, that was a great ride.
Yeah.
At some point, I was like, I think by the time I got to my destination, we were talking about like capitalism and socialism, and
Jesus.
Yeah, it was a great time.
I can probably predict every single one of her positions based on the sole fact that she's into astrology. And I say that because there's always a strong correlation between people who are staunch believers in astrology and hardcore left-wing,
It's very strange. Like, I know some people. I have a good friend who's in Stanford, and she's really into. I think there's a bit of a gender thing too. Like, girls are really into it.
They're also that's interesting. Girls are more into astrology, and girls tend to be on average more religious than men are. Yeah,
all three of the girls in the car were like, everybody knew their sign. All their signs, their lunar, their Mars sign, their Pluto sign. Everybody knew their signs, and then me and the other dude were like, "What the hell is happening?" We were all talking about like, "Ooh, mine's I'm a." Oh, there's one girl. She was really annoyed that she's a Leo.
She was like, annoyed that she was a Leo.
Yeah, I was like, I don't feel like I'm a Leo.
Does she identify as a Capricorn?
Something like that. And then they were making like relationship advice based off of it. Mm-hmm. She was the girl was telling me that I should be dating, like, I'm an Aquarius apparently, and I should be dating somebody. What was it? Somebody who's like opposite, who's like very spiritual.
So your birthday's in April, late March?
No, it's January.
January? Okay, I have it reversed.
Yeah. So she was telling me that I should be with somebody who's very spiritual, and I was like, I'm highly, skeptical of that, which is a position I usually take. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Yeah, I could be in a car with, 9 flat earthers versus a car with just one person who is dedicated to astrology, and I would always pick the 9 flat earthers.
It's a little fun. Like, there's appeal to it. It's kind of fun. It's like, gemstones and, those personality quizzes. I get the appeal.
I get the like the Myers-Briggs tests. I get being interested in that, but being interested in astrology is like being interested in continuously taking exams and continuously failing them.
It's a lesson in confirmation bias from my perspective. It's like if you get it wrong, they'll tell you, well, you didn't give me, like she said this, you didn't give me your birth time.
Yeah.
Because you can get more specific, right? And that changes stuff. Like if it's all about where the planets are, what the angles are,
Right.
and everything.
Did she take into consideration precession and Milankovitch cycles?
I don't know. She just put everything into a website, and then
Oh,
it
nice.
all popped out all
Well,
the numbers. Well,
there you go. That's all you need.
yeah.
You ever gone on those websites that tell you when you're gonna die? You type in like I don't know, it like asks you. I was watching the.
I think I
IQ
have a
videos.
while ago, but
Yeah, I remember. I must have done one of those things when I was like 12, and it told me I was gonna die when I was 23. Oh shit, 23. So next year, if I remember correctly.
Wait, what did you input there? I'm concerned.
I think it asked me like how tall I was, my weight, when I was born, my full name.
Because you can do a better job than that. You can like predict people based off. You can do some decent-ish predictions
Based on
off,
their
like,
health, their current health records.
like I don't know, smoking and alcohol usage and
Yeah.
where they you can get pretty accurately just based off of your address.
Mhm.
Like there's that a really strong correlation between address and life expectancy. It's very concerning,
Right.
actually.
Based on the level of poverty that you're living in, or based on the
Yeah.
level of affluence.
Yeah, definitely. Like so you can that one's less bullshit because there's some things that correlate with lifespan.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was a fun time, and I met some interesting people.
5 hours of that? That doesn't sound fun.
I enjoyed it. We were just debating, and she was very friendly. Like I'll keep
Except when you said retarded.
She just gave me like a glance, like a judgmental eye.
Like, Jesus. I didn't know you people
But
still
it
existed.
was like, you can't see it in podcast form, but it was, somebody giving you the evil eye.
The evil eye, the stink eye. That's fun. That's fun. You should just take the train next time.
I enjoyed it. It's better than just like, oh, what's your major?
Oh, those boring questions?
Ooh,
Girls don't like it when you ask them for their major, if you're interested in them, because that's just such a boring question.
what do you ask girls?
I don't really talk to. I try to avoid.
Oh,
No, I'm kidding.
avoid at all costs.
Anyways,
Okay.
who are we sponsored by today?
Ah, jeez. Girls.
We're sponsored by girls today. Okay.
Yeah.
Any type of particular girls?
Uh,
Did you see that Tinder for April Fools was having the heights, to try to certify your height? So if you claim that you're 5'10", but you're actually like 5'6", you'd have to...
dude, I wish.
Yeah, well, I mean, it
All
was an
those
April
liars.
Fool's joke, yeah. I like the responses, though. Like, all the responses on Twitter were like, well, there should also be one for weight.
And dick
jabbing
size.
at the girls who always ask, how tall are you? Oh, I'd be screwed. I'm short, so I'd be screwed with the height thing.
Yeah, you gotta lie. You have to lie.
Yeah, I lie.
Yeah.
So on a good day, depending on how hot it is,
Mhm. Oh yeah, you measure laying down
Yeah.
because your vertebrae are spread out, of course.
exactly. So I'd be like 5'8".
And you take in account the heels, the
Oh,
the
insoles.
shoes.
Yeah, I gotta wear that stuff. Like on the worst possible day imaginable, I'd be like 5'6".
On your top hat that you always wear wherever you go.
Always wear a top hat. I always make sure that I always wear conditioner so my hair puffs up and I look taller.
Hmm. So free will.
Yeah, free will. So let's talk about free will now that we're sponsored by girls and sponsored by Tinder also. And let's go into the conversation around free will. So this will probably be a much shorter podcast than last time, which was an hour and 20 some odd minutes. And that one we did have differing views, where I would consider myself a moral realist, you consider yourself a moral subjectivist. This time we're probably actually gonna have more
Yeah, I
lines of
suspect little
intersection.
disagreement.
Very little. So, what's your view on free will? Are you a compatibilist, a determinist, or
Well,
a libertarian?
I'm-
And let's define those terms also.
So yeah, there's always that libertarian free will thing. I'm not that. I don't believe in libertarian free will. I view people as decision-making machines, where we get inputs from our surroundings. We have eyes, we have sensory organs, and our minds are complex black boxes that take those inputs and then make a decision. And even if we don't understand the entire complexities of that whole mechanism, it still seems to be following the laws of physics, which seem fairly deterministic, although I'm using the word deterministic not as fatalistic or fatalism or hard determinism, but more like soft determinism as in like we have there's probabilities, and you can have some quantum stuff in there. As long as we don't personally control the outputs, like we don't have any own control of the outputs that comes from our minds, and in that scenario, I am determinist. I believe in a deterministic mind in that sense.
Yeah, and so I'm on the same page as you. Just to quickly define a few terms, so libertarian free will is the free will that most people believe in. If you were to poll, 100 people on the street, most of them would say that they believe in that there's this dualistic aspect to the brain that allows you to make decisions regardless of any extraneous factors that would have influenced that decision. So if every day you wake up and you either have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and then one day you decide to have a cup of coffee, someone who believes in libertarian free will believes that given the same exact circumstances, the same history of the universe, the same neurological conditioning that you've had up until that point, your brain is reacting the same exact way, you could have just as easily have chosen tea instead of coffee. So that would be the libertarian position.
Yeah. In other words, if you went back in time a minute ago, you could have made a different decision.
Yeah. The determinist position would say, well, obviously not. You can't deny the laws of physics, the laws of biology. So you would have to always have chosen coffee at that same exact instance. It's physically impossible for you to have done otherwise.
Or it would be random, and you had no control over it.
Yeah, you just, as you said, our mind is just a black box, and we're consciously aware of the decisions that are being made, but we are not making those decisions. And what a compatibilist will say, and I'm going to try to steelman their position as much as possible. A compatibilist will say, yes, that's true. Determinism is real, and this is what most philosophers would probably say, and most physicists such as Sean Carroll, who's a theoretical physicist at Caltech, would say, who argues for. He says, okay, yes, determinism technically is true, but when we talk about free will, or when we think about free will, that's not really the free will that is important to us. What is important to us is the ability to be consciously aware of these decisions that are being made, and these decisions are influenceable in ways that your height is not influenceable, or any other genetic factors that you just can't influence. And so because of that, Matt Dillahunty, when he was debating Sam Harris on free will, he talked about, the free will that I care about is the free will that allows me to decide whether or not I want to throw you into the crowd at this moment. I understand that deterministic factors are ultimately at play, but there are different levels of reality that we work with. So we don't really care about the subatomic workings going on in our brains that are influencing these decisions. We only really care about it at this higher level of awareness that we have. And that's an awareness that ants don't have, that's an awareness that microorganisms don't have, but we do, And so that's really what matters. And my argument against compatibilism always has been that I think it's a disingenuous take on free will. So I never watched the debate between Matt Dillahunty and Stephen from Rationality Rules, but I'm assuming there must have been a conversation between using free will versus just using the word will.
Yeah, it was mainly semantics and the best strategy for conversation.
Yeah.
What makes people understand language the best. Although I don't think there was much disagreement on any metaphysical claims.
Yeah, because Matt Dillahunty is a compatibilist and Stephen is a determinist, right?
Yeah, he just uses the word will when people use
I 100% agree with that. Because, again, as I mentioned before, if you were to poll most people would consider free will to be a dualistic version or a libertarian version of free will. And if you were to look up free will in Webster's Dictionary and dictionary.com, Merriam-Webster's Dictionary, I just said Webster's twice, whatever, most definitions would lean more towards a libertarian version of free will, though I will admit there's some wiggle room. I made a video not too long ago where Neil deGrasse Tyson had Sam Harris on Star Talk Radio, and then he also had Andrew Goldberg, and they were basically just kind of critiquing Sam's view of free will. And so, I didn't like the take that Andrew gave on free will, he basically was a compatibilist. He said, yes, free will is real, and it depends on how you define free will. Well, I'll say, yeah, of course it depends on how you define it, but based on the fact that most people define free will as a libertarian version of free will, based on the fact that most dictionary definitions lean towards in the direction of libertarian free will, we have to be precise in our language. We have to be responsible in the way how we choose to define words. And so I would much prefer to use will rather than free will when discussing whether or not we have free will or not.
Yeah. Excellent. Dropping your Monster Energy.
We're not sponsored by
Not
Monster
sponsored.
This week.
It's
maybe next week we will do.
Yeah, we'll see. So yeah, in that sense, I'm like, the brain is a decision-making machine, and in that sense, it's the will. Our will is, and there's also a distinction between desires and will that I think was in the rationality rules Matt Dillahunty debate, where they distinguished it. Some people don't distinguish will from desires. I think they have slightly different connotations. But yeah, so the brain gets inputs and then it makes decisions, like, a computer gets inputs and makes decisions in the same way. But I think the more interesting question with free will and why it's such a hot topic is the moral aspect of it, and moral responsibility. I don't know what your take is on it, but I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah.
Do you believe in moral responsibility?
I believe, again, so I feel like people are getting the prerequisite to listening to this would be our views on morality. So you and I have different views on morality.
Yes.
So for me,
we can define, like, I can use your definition of morality, and then we can have a conversation that's on the same footing.
Yeah. So my definition of morality is something that is moral is something that it prioritizes the well-being of a society over the harm or damage done to a particular society. So, for instance, if there is a specific governmental policy that most people would prefer, and it would make people better off medically, educationally, I would consider that a more moral policy than one that would just make people better off educationally, but not emotionally.
All right, I'm perfectly fine using that definition of morality. Mine, for me, in my worldview or how I define terms, that would be just like some sort of game theory-esque maxim, where you can somehow compute everybody has a moral function, and then it's somehow added together, and you get this kind of universal maxim for something like that. So, but yes, I will use that as morality, and then we can converse as usual.
Okay, cool. And so I think talking about free will is important because part of the problem with our judicial system now is that we punish people based on retributional response, based on vindictiveness, and things that we really shouldn't be too concerned with. I think we should be more concerned, given the fact that I don't believe in free will, with trying to reduce the amount of harm done to society. So if this is the case, our main priority when arresting someone for, let's say, raping children or for murdering 6 people or murdering their family, our main priority shouldn't be punishing them simply because of the way that they made us feel. Our main priority should be in rehabilitation.
So you want to take empathy out of the equation? It's like if every single person's angry at a person's action, even if it didn't cause any sort of like objective damage, it's just like disgust, for example. Like you can say, and this is the rationale that I would agree with you on, which would be like if the entire society, for some reason, is disgusted by sodomy, as we are. The Sodomites, I guess, then should it be banned? Even if that disgust.
Yeah.
Would you take the empathy into equation? Just out of curiosity, this kind of side issue.
So I agree with Paul Bloom's statement on empathy. He wrote a book that was very controversial, I think in 2006. No, it must have been in 2012 or something. I don't remember. It's called Against Empathy. And it's a pretty short book, great book. If you want my full take on it, just go on my Goodreads account. I don't know what my username is, but I'm sure it's linked on my Twitter. but I'm not a huge fan of empathy, mainly because it forces us to prioritize the few over the many, the closer over the people who are farther away, the familiarity against the unfamiliarity, even though it's potentially causing more harm to society than good. So I would take empathy out of the equation. Otherwise, you'd be able to very easily justify slavery. If most people in the 19th and 17th century, 18th century, they were perfectly fine with slavery, then using, the logic used to kind of justify mob mentality.
Dehumanizing affects empathy in that sense, where you can dehumanize people such that you don't have empathy for them anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd go even deeper with that, where I'd say that moral decisions were made before empathetic decisions were made. So we choose to, and I use choose in the very, liberal sense here, we choose to have empathy for a person after we've already made a moral judgment on them. And they've done studies and analysis that Paul Bloom illuminates in his book Against Empathy, which, again, I recommend. And so because of this, I think it is a very poor method of understanding who we should and shouldn't punish. So when it comes to the judicial system, when it comes to giving, I guess, just moral judgment on people, it shouldn't be based on the way that we have felt about the particular decision. It should be based on the amount of damage that has been done to society because of that particular decision. And so that's why the main priority should be rehabilitation. It should not be spitefulness. It should not be judgments, and it should not be, retribution.
Okay, so yeah, I will tend to agree with you. Rehabilitation is important. I will also say that most of the reason that we punish people isn't for rehabilitation, at least not in the United States. Maybe it should be, but it's more discouragement, I would say. If somebody murders, then, and it's very likely they're never going to murder again. Maybe, they became blind afterwards. Even in the case where the murderer is no longer a danger to society in any way, I would still be okay with punishment. Even they're effectively rehabilitated.
Yeah.
Because of discouragement. Because if you say it's okay, every single punishment is saying, every time you don't punish somebody who committed something that is bad for society, you are saying to people, you could commit this and nothing will happen to you.
I should just put a pin in something, just to make sure that people don't misinterpret what I said. If punishment is an effective method of rehabilitation or of preventing further damages done to society, I think that could be justified. But a lot of the times it's not. So they've done some studies where they looked at states where capital punishment was legal.
Yeah. And people don't act rationally that way, where even if the punishment is increased, their actions don't change.
It doesn't matter. So
yes.
It's I can't justify
Agreed.
capital
It should be
punishment.
evidence-based. And this is a psychological field where the punishment shouldn't be based off of people's emotions, but rather what would reduce crime the most for the least damage or cost, right? Because there's cost to punishment. It's a huge industry. There's tons of people punished, especially in the United States. We have a huge complex of imprisonment, and that's very costly, and it's based a lot off of these disgust, empathy or emotion-based reasonings rather than what would reduce crime the most, what would and it's evidence-based, data-driven, right?
Yeah.
So yes, so in that sense, that's what punishment should be for. That's what moral responsibility for me is too, as I think it is for you. It's not based off of I'm not gonna blame, even if somebody committed the worst heinous crime. Sure, you have this gut evil sense, this person's just evil, right? You want to dismiss them as evil, but you can always look into any person, no matter what they did, and if you learn their history, maybe they went through childhood abuse, and you will eventually become more and more empathetic to them. And you can do this with anybody, any crime, even freaking Hitler. You can do this, it's maybe it was something, I don't know. Hitler's a bit of an extreme example, and most criminals aren't this kind of hatred.
But I think it's philosophically important to note
Yeah.
the extreme examples.
Yes, but you could go into any person that you have this guttural hatred for, this like sense of this person's just evil, and then you can go and look into their background and trace the cause and effect that caused them to act this way, and you will always gain more and more empathy, even if you don't want it, and then so you have to be able to separate that and say, okay. Crime. I think there's a John Green Vlogbrothers video about Batman where this is crime isn't caused by evil. It's caused by poverty. It's caused by systematic disenfranchisement and stuff like that. And that's the source of poverty, the source of crime, and this sense of like there's just pure evil and good, and that's why we should punish purely for this like spiteful justice kind of thing is damaging and a waste of time and resources.
Yeah, I agree. One of the instances that's brought up a lot is the case of Walt Whitman, where Walt Whitman was someone who, I think he climbed on top of a tower. I think it was at the University of Texas, Austin. I don't remember, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but the general idea is still there, where he murdered numerous people with a sniper rifle. And I think what Walt Whitman stated was that he wanted his head to be checked. And this is an example that I gave in my response to Sartok's episode, Free Will, was that he wanted his head analyzed because he knew, rationally speaking, that he shouldn't be doing this. But he, for some reason, had this huge emotional tendency, this desire, this burning desire, where he had to do it even though he knew it was rationally wrong. So he wanted his brain analyzed. And they analyzed his brain, and they noticed that there was a tumor in his prefrontal cortex that was affecting, I think it was his amygdala that was affecting his emotional decisions. And so the question is, if that tumor would have been removed, or if Walt Whitman would have still been alive, and if we were to remove that tumor, and that tumor were to effectively have removed any murderous tendencies that he would have had, should we place him back into society as a normal person, or do we still take him to prison?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, it's almost impossible to justify putting him in prison at this point, because we know that his murderous tendencies were not caused by his general character, the general attributes that he would have been born with.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a perfectly functional human being in society, and by putting him in prison, we're acting on our emotional response to the situation rather than any rational response to the situation.
Yeah.
So what's your take on the Whitman case?
Well, I'm of course not familiar with the Whitman case specifically, but from what you said, I would say if somebody made the argument that we should punish him anyway, I would say, well, the question should be, is a person who is separate from this case going to look at the Whitman case and say, oh, if he gets away with it because of his tumor, why can't I do it and not get punished? Well, you don't have a tumor in your brain. So your action can't be justified in the same way. But it's an interesting question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you didn't have a tumor and you made that decision, in a sense, there's like an invisible tumor. Like something is wrong with him anyway, right? There's something mentally that he didn't decide. Like nobody chooses. You don't choose to become a horrible person who gets put in prison for life and like being an outcast from society. It's not, there's no free will in this decision. You were born, this way, or you were invited. It's either nature or nurture, unless there's some third one that I'm not aware of. And both of those are not in his control.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a fascinating question, and it really challenges like the case for moral responsibility. In that sense.
Yeah. Here's a question I want to throw at you that this is something that I've been thinking about recently, and I haven't thought about it too deeply, so I don't really have a well thought out, fleshed out thought on it. So it's, because we know that we live in a deterministic world, and because we know that free will is not something that exists, we're nothing more than products of our biology, of the laws of physics, we're nothing more than products of our brains, when we're just consciously aware of the decisions that are being made, but we're not making these decisions. So because of this, then would this induce people to no longer be selfish? Or sorry, would this induce people to no longer, why am I blanking out on the word? To be jealous, for instance, of their girlfriend who's talking to another guy, or to be angry towards people that they don't like, or any of these things. So I'd say, like, you can't just...
I think that personally, this is some personal anecdote, I, after thinking about these issues, don't remember last time I was angry with anybody.
Okay.
Like, I genuinely think my personality has changed. I'm very non-judgmental, and I am empathetic with, like, literally everyone, no matter who.
Yeah.
I don't get angry at a personal level. I'll get angry at an idea. And there's things that will make me upset, which is mostly exploitation in some degrees, where people who know a lot about a topic and purposefully mislead people. That annoys me viscerally. But I don't get upset, and I think that affects like my worldview in a very deep sense, where I view everybody as like selfish robots that have some empathy. Like, that's just how I view people. It's people will act selfishly if they think they have the opportunity, but they also have empathy, and there's sort of like a psychological behaviors that people view things as a societal thing and as like an economic thing where they're more selfish, and you can have certain behavioral traits. But in that sense, I will never be angry at a CEO for like increasing the price of a super expensive drug. I'm like, I get it. You're acting selfishly. And
are you angry at Martin Shkreli?
Yeah, absolutely not.
Okay.
Right? Like, so, like, you know, you don't. People. I want to point out that people don't like people who don't have empathy. Right? So, people don't like Martin Shkreli because he cares more about his money, even though he's in jail, right? He cares more about his money than people, like the poor people that he's screwing over, right? So people don't like that about him, about that personality traits. That's sort of the empathy side. But if he, in his head, did the calculus, and he says, I don't care about what they think about me, I'm getting rich. I'm not angry at Martin Shkreli. I'm angry at the system that let this happen. I want to change the system. I follow the don't hate the player, hate the game philosophy. I don't know if that's a philosophy, but I will never be upset at anybody for acting selfishly. I might not want to hang around with somebody who acts selfishly, and I hope that they took that into account. Like, if somebody is never generous, and, you know, if you interact with, like, you have a roommate and they'll never share anything, you're not friends with them. Yeah. So I will always share with people. I will always, let people, give them whatever they want. I'll do favors for people, because that makes them want to hang out with me, and I like hanging out with them. So it's mutually beneficial. But if somebody did the calculus in their head and says it's not, like, even if I get their friendship, I will be rich. I get it. Like, you're acting selfishly. This is the system. You're playing the game, and this is the decision you made. I'm not upset with them, but I will want to change the system, so such that somebody like Martin Shkreli, like, you don't get super rich off of doing something like that, or exploiting some patent, or like something like that.
Yeah, and I completely agree with everything that you said. The part that would give me pause, and this is the part that I've been thinking about, is that realizing that free will is nothing more than an illusion would sort of force us to reevaluate our positions on anger and selfishness and jealousy. However, these are emotions that we have been given to by evolution because they were evolutionarily beneficial for the preservation of our genes, for passing on our genetics or code. So these are probably necessary feelings that we need to continue having.
They're a shortcut. I would take the position that they're a shortcut to a position I agree with.
Right.
Which is, those emotions lead you to a response that I would agree with. Like, if you're angry about somebody exploiting people, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, you get that, like, I'm angry, this is a problem, let's fix it, kind of thought out. But you can also say, okay, if we want to maximize collective utility in these super, like this, then this is a policy that will lead this to happen less. And you can act super uber rationally instead and get to the same conclusion as this anger. But I would also say that anger sometimes gets you into conclusions that I would disagree. If you are super rational, then you will get into positions that will disagree with your initial gut reactions. Right. You will why do I hate, if you're a homophobe, why do I hate gay people? You ask that question. Maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe it's something, and asking that question lets you challenge your gut emotions, your disgust factor, your anger, and all those emotional impulses, and then you will eventually no longer be angry about those things. You can change your responses based off of your rationality in that sense.
So our ability to reason, our ability to kind of think about and evaluate the propositions that we've made for ourselves override the natural tendencies that we would otherwise have had. So my question that I ask myself is the power of rationalizing your position stronger than the power of the natural course correction that our emotions would have originally given us? Because everything is technically influenced by our emotions. As Antonio Damasio states, he's a USC professor, he's a neuroscientist. He talks about the power of feelings, where everything is ultimately brought down to a feeling. So we want to be rational because we feel that is the best method of understanding reality. Of course, that feeling is influenced and by all the evidence that we've had collected, but everything is effectively
Well, I'm going to define rationality just for a second, which is, for me, rationality is given a goal, what's the best decision to get to that goal? A decision is more rational if it is better at getting to a goal. So rationality in this pure sense, kind of like how Kant uses it, I'm confused by it. What does that just pure rationality mean? My position is the goal is my personal self-interest, and then by extension, my society's best interest. So I will make decisions based off of that. So in that sense, if I have an emotional response to something, I will challenge it in the sense that I will say, okay, wait a second, does this emotional response actually lead me to something that's better off for me, or is this going to lead me somewhere that I think won't actually, but maybe instinctively does? In that sense. I don't know, kind of, what were you going to say after that?
No, I mean, I was basically just going to say whether or not, I think just the bottom point of what I was saying was that, whether or not our ability to rationalize about the things that we're doing is stronger than our reactions to the feelings that we have. And so I think that at this point in our evolution, at this point in the level of awareness that we have in our society, I think, yes, our ability to rationalize positions is stronger than our ability to, or the inherent tendency that we have to react on our feelings. But it's something that you sort of have to train yourself.
Yeah, it's definitely trained. I recall me in the past, and I was much more emotionally driven, I think. I would get upset at people, I would get angry. Now I just don't recall having that feeling in a very long time. I don't think I'll get heated, and if it's an interesting topic, but I'll never get angry at somebody.
Yeah.
Because I understand that they came, I have an implicit assumption that they are in goodwill, they're not being malicious to me, and if they are, then maybe I'll get a little upset.
Yeah, well, you still have that feeling of anger, right? But you're able to rationalize your way out of acting on that anger and understanding the position more. Because I can say the same thing about you, but I still feel the feelings of annoyance or anger.
I genuinely think maybe I do. I still feel some feelings, of course, but I also think I feel them less now. I genuinely I don't get angry at people. I'll never hit somebody. If somebody does something to me, I got punched in the face, and I'm just why did you do that? I won't punch back, and then that's something that I probably would have done in the past. I don't know how to describe it. I think that thinking about free will has made me not as emotional. Like it's made me less emotional than in the past.
You're just a robot now.
I've become one with the robots. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, so I feel like we pretty much have the same position on this. Not as much argumentation as we did on the conversation on morality, but
I feel like if there was somebody who disagreed with us, this could be very interesting, because I think this is not like we're sort of like we're agreeing on sort of implicit premises that people will probably find very contentious.
Disagree with, yeah.
But maybe another time somebody.
Yeah, we got to find someone.
Or in the comments, if you have a disagreement,
Yeah, who knows? Maybe our fellow friend. I'm pretty sure he's a determinist, though, but we've never actually gone into a long conversation.
I think is probably. I feel like he might be a determinist. I'm not sure. Maybe.
We'll find out on Tuesday.
Yeah,
Are we still having the meetings on Tuesday?
We'll see. I don't know. It might change. Did you want to go to the meritocracy, and it's sort of slightly associated with free will, but like how?
I feel like that'd be cooler for.
Or do you want to just end it on free will?
Yeah, let's just end it. Because I want to call this video specifically like free will, and
it's related though. Like it's a similar topic. It's a small one, but
meritocracy versus.
Not necessarily meritocracy in the government sense of like, do the people who succeed do well, but the idea of if we're not in control of our minds, this is more of, are we in control of anything? Like all of our traits, height, as you are a very, very short man, 3 feet
right,
in fact.
I'm not that short, all right.
Wearing a top hat in order to extend your height, it's very strange. But like if you're not, you're born, you're not in control of your heights, you're not going to be a basketball player if you're not tall enough. If you're not, if you're just born dumb, sucks to suck, you're not getting a good job.
Sorry, Kenham.
Yeah. If you are, unattractive, people will treat you worse, like objectively, like, they won't.
You'll get me too, whereas otherwise.
Yeah, you'll be like a creep instead of like, ooh, flattered, right? And all of these stuff is based on. I'm sort of hijacking. I know you wanted to make this just about free will. I'm going.
No, that's fine. Go for it.
But all these things that you don't have, they're just luck based, right? Like, you didn't choose all these attributes. You just got lucky. And do you have any thoughts about this? Like, why do we idolize certain traits? Why do we idolize strong people, smart people? We give these awards to them. We give, beauty pageants. And
Well, I can only answer on the basis of what are the factors that led us to idolize this, but, there's no really real reason why we do so, ontologically speaking. We do so just because we consider those genes to be better than genes otherwise that would have induced someone who is weak or someone who is short or someone who is ugly. These are just genes that we prefer based on the laws of evolution. Now, the moral argument that we'd have to implement here is that should we continue to preserve these specific attributes, understanding that these are attributes that no one really chooses, right? As you said, no one chooses to be ugly. No one chooses
And even
to be
stuff
tall.
that's based off of purely hard work.
Yeah.
Oh, you were just born with a strong work ethic.
Yeah.
You can even go further than, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's still necessary in a society.
And you got nurtured into a strong work ethic. Your parents encouraged you early or whatever.
Yeah. But I think it's still necessary in a society to value things that are influenceable, because otherwise if we don't value those, then people will not be induced to want to influence their things, right? Because people always, you kind of alluded to this earlier, where people get confused with a deterministic view of reality with fatalism, where people think that, okay, well, if we don't have free will, then what's the point in even doing anything?
Yeah,
I'm
like,
already in it.
why are you even going to go to school tomorrow?
Yeah, it's
why
like,
are
no, yeah, exactly. So like, no, like, these things are still influenceable, so they can still be influenced. Just because you are not the origins of these influences doesn't mean that your brain processes won't change based on factors that are inputted into it.
Yeah.
So we still have to value these influences, and because of that, I would say that there's still some things that out there that we really should kind of care about, that we should look up for, and you can do that while still recognizing that we live in a deterministic world, while still recognizing that these people don't need to be shamed for being short. They don't need to be shamed for being ugly. They don't need to be shamed for not having the mental capacity to be physicists. But it's just a recognition that, if you want to be a physicist, you need to be, above average intelligence, as with a computer scientist or a STEM field in general.
I really don't.
Do you think we should lower the criteria for being a computer
No,
scientist?
I'm joking. But like, wait, we don't. There shouldn't be a criteria for being a computer science. Be a computer science if you want to. You're going to put the time and effort into doing it.
Yeah. Like, let's say someone who genuinely does not have the mental capacity to become a computer scientist, and he wants to, and he studies every day, every night, but he just can't pass his exams no matter how hard he tries. So is it just tough shit for him?
That's some bad luck there.
Yeah, I'd agree. No, I'd agree.
Like, I couldn't say any oughts. I'm not gonna make any ought claim. He shouldn't or shouldn't. If maybe he'd be better off with something that he's better at, or she. Like.
Let's not pretend like women can be in STEM.
Oh my god, Junior, freaking hot takes. No, we were sponsored by women.
I thought we were sponsored by. Wait. Oh, that's right. Tinder.
God,
Hey man,
they're gonna stop. They're gonna stop sponsoring us.
I literally came here from a 3-hour drive with insane traffic. I got here 2 seconds later. You arrived, and I'm like, all right, we're doing this. Oh my
gosh, it's like freaking like advertising Android device and with like.
All right, I'm really sorry for our sponsors. Anyway. You know what? It's my bad haircut. I got a bad haircut, and that's what's screwing me over right now.
Anyway. So I pretty much agree with your take. I was curious because my take's pretty much the same, which is that there's certain things like hard work that sure nature versus nurture both influence your capacity for hard work, but the act of rewarding it and showing it as an ideal is going to influence people's decisions, and that they will work harder if there's a reward for it. Like if hard work is seen as a virtue, then people will decide to work hard if they otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, stuff like beauty pageant, like even if you idolize it or you disidolize it, it's not right. It doesn't affect people's beauty. Like maybe they're gonna take more plastic surgery, right? But like that's not a virtue. Like that's not beneficial to society. More people taking plastic surgery.
Right.
So idolizing beauty, in contrast to hard work, won't increase the amount of beauty. It's just gonna make everybody who's not beautiful feel horrible.
Well, what about people who go to the gym or they try to make their hair? They shower more. There are some factors in beauty that you can influence.
Yeah, well, of course. So yes, you want good hygiene, for example.
Yeah.
Like you idolize good hygiene. You should idolize things that will actually change behaviors in a positive way, and you shouldn't idolize things that you can't.
Yeah, like
that's my position.
Yeah, like you were mentioning the beauty pageant, for instance,
yes,
right? I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the main things that people look for in those beauty pageants in women is their height. So tall women.
Yeah, tall, symmetric, and all those studies, right? Like, so there is you can, the idea that everybody's beautiful is kind of not true. You can statistically show that some people and certain traits are more people find them beautiful.
Yeah.
But if you idolize stuff that can't change by if it did change, it wouldn't create a better society, then you're just making everybody feel like shit who doesn't meet that standard.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if you idolize something like hard work, sure, maybe you're making some people who are lazy feel bad. But like you're also making people work harder more, which is something that we value in society, or intelligence or studying, right? Like, sure, there's natural talent involved, but like a lot of good research, or like high honors, like Fields Medal, is just hard work and dedication into something that people are passionate about, or art or whatever. So the value of an ideolo- yeah, idolizing certain characteristics is in how that idolization will affect them in the future. And then that's sort of what that's how I sort of tied it in with free will, in that, sure, maybe it's all luck, but we can also change the future. We can change the pressures and to create the society that we prefer.
Yeah.
In that sense.
I agree with you completely. 100%.
All right. So that's the scheduled topics.
Yeah. I mean, we're right under an hour, right? We're 54 minutes. That was pretty good.
Yeah. Hopefully there'll be less popping this time. Apologies for the previous podcast. Yeah. Hopefully the voice quality is better.
We have 3 different voice recordings.
One of them's got to be decent.
Yeah. A pox on technology. If not one of those recordings came out decent. The last one was pretty bad.
Yeah.
And now we're in a much better place. We have a name for the podcast. Yes. We have an intro and an outro.
Yes.
We have somewhat of a schedule now. So we could probably do it like every Saturday or every Sunday.
Yeah. We can even just bring it to the freaking Tuesday meetings.
Honestly, yeah, we could easily do that.
And then we have like a good hour to discuss. I think that'd be pretty fun.
I wonder, the acoustics are probably bad in that room though. There's a lot of echoing.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm sure I can.
We could try it out and see how it works.
So awesome. This was great. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to a recent book that came out on March 19th. So it's The Conversation That Sparked an Atheist Revolution. The book is called The Four Horsemen, and it's just a transcript of the conversation that transpired between Hitchens, Dawkins, Harris, and Dennett. And I think it was like a 2-hour-long conversation around there. And I would say it's a pretty cheap book. It's like $11, $12 on Amazon, so it's not like you're paying $25 or $20 for a book that you can literally just see. But I would say that the book is worth checking out because of the 4 forewords that it has. It has 3 forewords from the living horsemen. Rest in peace.
Well, one of them is Hitchens. The ghost of Hitchens is written a foreword, and it's very eloquent.
It's kind of scary, actually. He talks about how hell is real, and he's being
tortured. Yeah, it's freaking horrible.
Yeah, that's weird. It's like, oh, all right.
Well, we'll disregard that.
Yeah. But the cool foreword is by Stephen Fry. I only say cool because he's not in the Four Horsemen. But Stephen Fry is someone that you just can't hate.
He's a lovable guy.
He's amazing. He is incredibly eloquent. He has a mastery of the English language that I would compare to Hitchens. Beautiful.
Freaking British.
Beautiful. Yeah, I wish I was
Why
British.
Can't we talk so good?
Do you really believe that a flying horse went to the moon? Did I sound like Dawkins right there?
Yeah, that was actually, it was a terrible British accent. I'm sure, if I had an ear for bad accents, but
I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but when I worked at a movie theater a few years ago, I actually got really bored when I was at the concession stand, and I would always pretend I have a British accent. How good is that? From 0 to a 10?
I liked your Dawkins one more.
The Dawkins one more?
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know anything about accents, but
I wonder if we would. I mean, I'd have somewhat of a genuine British accent if I lived in England for around 20 years. I can't imagine my American accent.
Well, it depends where you live. If you live in London, you'll probably not have that much of an accent.
Yeah, there's a lot of diversity in London. Let's say I live like in I don't know, Yorkshire or Canterbury.
Canterbury.
Yeah, Canterbury.
Okay, what's the Canterbury accent?
Well, I'm just saying Canterbury because there's not really much tourism there, or diversity. It's
a beautiful place.
Yeah, I love it.
I have.
You ever been to England?
No, I want to go.
Yeah, we'll go one of these days. I went there a few years ago.
Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm hoping to go there for grad school. I want to go to Cambridge for a PhD. I can't wait. Let's go backpacking.
Put this podcast as your in your resume.
Oh.
Or your whatever application.
Should I also have that joke that I recorded earlier on? All right.
Put that too.
All right. Well, anyways, everyone, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. Hopefully, it sounds a lot better than the previous one. Next week, we'll talk about. I don't know. We'll think about the topic. We won't announce it right now because it'd be a knee-jerk announcement. But we thank you very much for listening to this whole hour. If you did listen to this whole hour, if you only listened to the first 10 minutes,
they're gonna put it at 1.25 speed as.
Oh, like Destiny does.
Yeah, I started doing it. It's quite nice.
Really? Have you tried listening to Ben Shapiro at 1.5?
That's unachievable.
Jesus. It's like, it's like, what is it, like the 22 hertz of sound that you just can't, 2200 hertz.
Yeah, no, it goes into like dogs start getting annoyed by that one.
Yeah. It's like, it's like, it breaks the wine glass. So anyways, thank you very much for listening to this. If you want to follow me on any social media, I am Penrose Paradox on Instagram, and I am at Latent Physicist on Twitter. I'm not sure, you didn't want to give out any of your info last time. Do you want to give it this time?
No, not yet. Well, maybe Endless Aporia, but
that your YouTube channel?
Yeah.
You don't have anything on there though.
Well, there might be in the future. Depending.
You had a really funny accidental 16-minute video on there that you didn't realize.
Yeah, it's gone now. Hopefully. Maybe there'll be a video if Cosmic Skeptic releases his vegan video, and I might do a response to that.
Why don't you just upload it on this one?
I could.
Oh, we're also thinking. Well, I shouldn't say weird. I'm thinking about changing the name. I mentioned this too, from Secular Adam to something else because I don't like the name Secular Adam.
Well, yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Well, anyways, again, thank you all very much. We've hit the hour, so I gotta end it now. And we hope to see you next time. And thank you, women and Tinder, for sponsoring. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Endless Aporia. You can also follow me on Twitter at Latent Physicist or follow me on Instagram, Penrose Paradox. Be on the lookout for our next podcast in which we'll be having another man on the mic. Thanks for listening.